We have our three, not panelists, but persons today who are participating in our oral history project on education of students with emotional and behavioral disorders. On your left is Dr. Reece Peterson from the University of Nebraska. In the center, Dr. Rich Simpson from the University of Kansas. And on the right, Dr. Carl Smith from Iowa State University. As you know, there were a series of questions we thought might stimulate some thinking and some memories and experiences you've had over your careers. And we thought an initial question would be, how did you get into education of students with emotional and behavioral disorders? Rich, would you like to?
There is an element of protest and trying to improve our community and the world that has been a long-standing theme to all of this. And I think many of us in this field, not just me, but I'm thinking specifically of protesting the war in Vietnam at that time, but then later I was in Chicago in the riot period in '68, and it seems really important for our society to do things well for people, to improve the lot of our communities and our society. And then when I got in special ed, I guess I always have viewed it as a civil rights issue. And in fact, a friend of mine once told me that she said, "You're really lucky because you get to help people's civil rights every day of your life." And it always stuck with me because that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to ensure that kids get a fair shake in the system and that families do.
To me, as a basic psychology student and as a master's student in psychology. And so it just made sense in terms of my interpretation of that. And I found myself becoming very eclectic, and I continue to be that. To me, it's sort of like, there's no answer, and we struggle with things, and it's a way of sort of incorporating a variety of different thoughts. Somewhat reluctantly, I also have to share that I have a sister who has a severe emotional disturbance and grew up with a very severe psychiatric illness. And I watched my sister struggle, and I watched a school system where I was very successful. I was an athlete, and I was considered to be a school leader, and so I was very well accepted. My sister was basically pushed out the back door. Spent a lot of time in psychiatric hospitals and had some horrible, horrible experiences. And I saw my parents struggle in so many ways with my sister. My sister is in her 60s now and continues to live with my mother, who's in her late 80s and who continues to be the primary caretaker for my sister. And it was a painful experience, and I think because of that, I first of all had great anger towards the helping professions because I considered those people to be buffoonish, to have little or nothing to offer because I saw them doing nothing for my family. And I think there was resistance in initially getting into the field, but then when I sort of got into the field and I saw that there were opportunities for great advances, and on a micro and a macro level when we did the right things. I got very excited when I saw people doing things that made differences, and it really was very invigorating, and it really made me in a kind of a corny sort of way, without hoisting the flag of, I'm doing this for the family allegiance. It was never that. In fact, I'm still somewhat reluctant to even mention that I have a sibling with a disability. But it became kind of a real calling for, we can do things, and we do need to do things in the field to be able to provide some supports for some people that are in great pain. So I would say that probably was one of those events. While I didn't embrace it, I just sort of was this person that, for a long time, when I would read in textbooks about schizophrenia and the consanguinity links, one of the questions was, I wonder if on Saturday when I wake up, I'm going to be one. So I went through that period, and then it's sort of like, it may happen, but probably not, and sort of, I can sort of learn from what my family was going through. My parents were real stalwarts. They did not whine and complain. They really just stood up to the plate and dealt with this absolutely horrific family situation, and the neighbors and the relatives who inevitably, would be critical of, do something with Carol, why don't you do this or that? They were, looking in hindsight, absolutely wonderful. I mean, these were folks who just sort of did it from their guts, but it had a significant influence, and it still does to this day.
Therapeutically oriented and very dominated by, I guess, child psychiatric philosophy as far as working with children, and learned a great deal in that experience. Also working at an adolescent program, and then worked in the public schools and as a teacher. But probably one of the most important developments in my professional life was getting a call from the State Department of Education in Iowa that was known as the Department of Public Instruction when I was a teacher. And I've been involved in some controversies in this small district in Iowa. So one day when I got this call, somebody said the State Department, the Director of Special Education is on the line, and I thought I really had him mad at that point in time. But instead of that, he was wanting to talk about the fact that they were going to hire a consultant in the area of behavioral disorders. And up until that time, they had kind of shared that across people. And he knew that I was one of the people that had been mentioned as far as having that as a background. So he asked me to come to Des Moines and talk with him. And that was a very important part of my professional career from a somewhat non-traditional, because I think a lot of times people think of state departments of education as being highly bureaucratic, carrying out rules and regulations and things like this. And there were certainly those aspects of it, but it was also a time where there were grant monies available, as Rich talked about, and a number of grants that were somewhat discretionary as far as shaping the field. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to develop staff development, to host in-service meetings, to connect up with people all over the country. It was kind of a unique position where I had an excuse to call anybody, including Frank Wood. I could call at any point in time saying, we're trying to do this in Iowa, would you be able to come in and help us work on this? And that was just a wonderful opportunity. At the same time I was a doctoral student, but the thing I think about as far as a career was that I was pursuing my studies, but at the same time had resources and had a reason for connecting up with virtually anyone that I could get to answer their phone as far as types of things we wanted to do to develop programs. So to me, that was a real important event. As far as entering teacher education, I actually came to that fairly late in my career. From the standpoint of I spent 11 years at the State Department of Education, and then went into teacher education and went to originally a small private college to teach in special education, and then went back to intermediate size university and worked a lot with grants and grant programs and things such as that. And again, I saw that as an opportunity to kind of shape a number of different things that I wanted to do. So I guess as I reflect on my professional career, I just think that I really had an opportunity to have a foundation where I could come at issues regarding kids with behavioral disorders from a lot of different perspectives, and would have a good reason for talking to people about that, and much more, I guess, from a program development standpoint, and have really profited from that. So I think, again, I use the word non-traditional because I think, particularly compared to a lot of my colleagues in higher ed, that I've been able to kind of be in positions where I could interact and learn from a lot of people, and also have some real stimulating conversations and experience with that. So that's how I'd summarize it.
Despite your alternative